The galactic community never considered human merchant vessels a threat. They were a new species in the trade lanes, eager, naive, and, most importantly, unarmed. Every civilization followed the same unwritten rule: military ships carried weapons, civilian ships did not. It was a simple, universal truth. And for those who lived on the fringes of the law, it was an opportunity. Pirates had operated with impunity for centuries, preying on helpless freighters, taking cargo, crew, and ships without resistance. Merchant captains of other species accepted this as an inevitable cost of doing business, negotiating ransoms, or surrendering quietly to avoid bloodshed. Then humanity arrived. At first, they were dismissed as yet another easy target, soft prey in vulnerable ships filled with goods. When the first human convoys set out into the void, the pirate clans watched with amusement. The raiders had seen it countless times before: desperate distress signals, terrified voices pleading for mercy, cargo doors opening in surrender. And so, when a seasoned pirate fleet intercepted a small human trading convoy deep in neutral space, they expected nothing different. The lead pirate, an old warlord with hundreds of raids under his belt, hailed the humans with his standard message. His voice, dripping with mockery, filled the comms. "Jettison your cargo, power down your drives, and we'll make this quick. No one needs to die today." Silence. His crew laughed. Maybe the humans were still processing their doom, scrambling to decide whether to beg or fight the inevitable. But then, something strange happened. The human ships did not stop. They did not turn or slow. Instead, a single reply crackled over the comms, calm, cold, and devoid of fear. "You made a mistake." Before the pirate could respond, his scanners lit up with warnings. His laughter died in his throat. Automated defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments. Missile bays opened. Railgun batteries powered up. These weren't helpless cargo haulers. They were something else entirely. Merchant marines. The pirate barely had time to process it before the first shots were fired. A railgun round tore through his lead assault ship, splitting it apart in an instant. His fleet, accustomed to unarmed prey, was thrown into chaos. He shouted orders, demanding a counterattack, but his ships were already crumbling under precise, calculated fire. Human freighters moved like warships. Their captains weren't panicked civilians, they were trained combatants. Every vessel fought back with overwhelming force, coordinated as if they had done this 100 times before. Within minutes, half the pirate fleet was destroyed, the other half in full retreat. For the first time in galactic history, a pirate raid had not ended in plunder, but in disaster for the pirates. The few survivors fled, their messages of warning spreading like wildfire. Human merchants weren't victims. They were hunters. The surviving pirates limped back to their dens, broken and humiliated. Word spread faster than any official report: human traders weren't just fighting back, they were winning. Entire fleets of so-called helpless freighters had been quietly armed to the teeth. The galaxy had no precedent for this. Civilian ships weren't supposed to carry weapons, let alone turn the tables on seasoned raiders. At first, disbelief reigned. The major pirate factions dismissed the rumors as exaggeration, an anomaly, a single convoy that had somehow been prepared. But as more raiding parties vanished without a trace, skepticism turned to fear. Recorded transmissions surfaced, human voices calm under fire, issuing tactical orders like warship captains. The wreckage of pirate vessels drifted through trade lanes, silent warnings to anyone still foolish enough to try. Yet some refused to believe. The largest pirate clans, desperate to restore their dominance, gathered intelligence, trying to understand what they were up against. How had humans pulled this off? How had no one noticed? The truth was even worse than they feared. Humanity had never accepted the galactic norm of unarmed merchants. They had been sending military-trained personnel on their freighters from the beginning, disguising warships as cargo haulers. Every vessel, no matter how humble, had hidden turrets, reinforced hulls, and experienced gunners. They weren't waiting for permission to defend themselves. They had prepared for war before the first shot was ever fired. Faced with extinction, the remaining pirate lords made a fateful decision. If ambushes no longer worked, They would overwhelm the humans with sheer numbers. A grand fleet was assembled, a show of force meant to crush the so-called merchant marines once and for all. Hundreds of ships gathered at the fringes of human-controlled space, ready to strike in unison. They targeted a massive human trade convoy, larger than any before. This was it, the moment to re-establish pirate rule over the lanes. They dropped from FTL, weapons charged, eager for revenge. But the humans had anticipated them. The convoy didn't run. It didn't surrender. Instead, it opened fire first. From within the freighter's hulls, missile silos erupted, railguns launched devastating salvos, and energy weapons cut through pirate ranks with terrifying precision. The pirate fleet, expecting easy prey, found itself in the middle of a slaughter. The battle was over before it truly began. Some pirates tried to flee, but the humans pursued, picking them off one by one. For the first time in history, a full-scale pirate invasion had not just failed, it had been obliterated. The last few survivors scattered into deep space, carrying with them a single, undeniable truth. The age of easy raids was over. Humans had changed the game, and the galaxy had no idea how to respond. The aftermath of the massacre sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Trade authorities, military strategists, and planetary governments scrambled for answers. How had an entire system of commerce been upended overnight? Why had no one foreseen this? The realization came slowly, painfully. Humanity had never played by their rules. For centuries, the galaxy had operated under the assumption that civilians did not fight. That merchant vessels relied on escorts, diplomacy, or surrender to survive. Every species had accepted this, believing it was the natural order of interstellar trade. But humanity had looked at the same problem and come to a different conclusion. They had studied their own history. On Earth, piracy had once plagued the oceans, and the solution had never been appeasement. It had been force. Armed merchant ships, convoys trained in combat, privateers turning the tables on their attackers. Humanity had taken that same doctrine and applied it to space. Not because they sought war, but because they understood one fundamental truth: predators don't stop until they fear their prey. The Galactic Council held emergency meetings, debating whether to sanction humanity for breaking unwritten laws. Some called for restrictions, demanding that human trade ships disarm to restore the balance. But those voices were quickly drowned out by others who saw the reality: humanity had just made trade routes safer. For the first time in history, pirate factions were collapsing. Entire raiding networks, built on the assumption of defenseless merchants, were crumbling under the weight of their own failures. Where human convoys traveled, piracy vanished. Other species, long resigned to suffering losses, watched with cautious admiration. The most pragmatic governments took it a step further. If humans had solved the piracy problem, why not follow their lead? Within months, the first non-human merchant fleets began retrofitting their ships with weapons, hiring human consultants to train their crews. Not everyone embraced the change. Some viewed it as a dangerous escalation, fearing that if every trade vessel became a warship, open conflict between nations would become inevitable. But those fears meant little to the merchant captains who had spent centuries as easy prey. For them, the choice was simple: adapt or remain victims. The galaxy was shifting, whether it wanted to or not. And at the center of it all, humanity watched, unbothered. They had never asked for permission. They had simply done what needed to be done. The pirates who had once ruled the trade lanes were gone, replaced by something far more dangerous: merchants who refused to be prey. The last remnants of the pirate era clung to life in the lawless regions of space, desperate to reclaim what they had lost. Their networks were shattered, their fleets decimated, but one final warlord refused to accept defeat. He was old, ruthless, and driven by vengeance. If humanity had rewritten the rules of trade, he would show them that raw numbers still held power. He gathered every surviving pirate crew, every mercenary willing to take a risk, and every desperate soul who longed for the old ways. The fleet he assembled dwarfed anything seen before. A final, defiant strike meant to remind the galaxy that pirates still ruled the void. Their target was chosen carefully: a massive human trade fleet, rich with cargo, seemingly vulnerable. They launched their attack with overwhelming force, dropping from FTL in perfect formation, weapons primed. This was supposed to be their moment of resurgence, a show of strength that would terrify the galaxy back into submission. But the humans had been expecting them. The defenseless convoy was a decoy, bait meant to draw out what remained of the pirate threat. Before the raiders could react, hidden warships revealed themselves, dropping from stealth positions, cutting off every possible escape route. The merchant marines didn't just fight back this time, they hunted. Every human freighter moved with military precision, laying down suppressive fire, targeting engines, disabling ships with ruthless efficiency. There was no hesitation, no mercy. The pirates, who had once ruled the shadows, found themselves trapped, outmaneuvered, and utterly outgunned. The battle was over in minutes. The last pirate warlord, who had once commanded fear across the trade lanes, died screaming as his flagship was torn apart. The survivors scattered, running to the furthest reaches of space, knowing there was nowhere left for them. The age of piracy was officially over. In the weeks that followed, the galactic community accepted the new reality. Laws were rewritten. Merchant vessels of all species began arming themselves, no longer willing to rely on outdated ideals of pacifism. The trade lanes, once ruled by fear, had become battlegrounds where only the prepared survived. Humanity had never set out to change the galaxy. They had only done what was necessary. But in doing so, they had reshaped the very nature of commerce, proving once again that they were unlike any species that had come before. The final lesson was clear. The galaxy had underestimated humans. It would not make that mistake again.